I used to think absence would be met with silence, but some people fill your place before the air even cools. Croft didn't look up until I was halfway through tying my apron. His eyes flicked to the knot, then back to the register, like I hadn't been gone at all. Let's hope you're not planning any more time off for personal events. I didn't answer. The apron string had unraveled at the seam. I pressed my thumb into the fray until it stopped moving. Penny stood by the condiments tray, refilling napkins too precisely. Rue pretended not to see me as she rewrote the specials board, even though the chalk was already clear. I took the side station. Booth 3 waved for coffee. The pot was half full and already bitter, but no one ever complained here. I poured without looking up. Croft passed close enough that I caught his cologne cheap citrus with something chemical behind it. Next time you want to grieve, make sure it's on your own dime. There it was. Not a punch. Just a straight line through everything. A reminder that I'd been reduced to someone who wanted to grieve as if that were a luxury item he hadn't approved. I didn't drop the coffee pot. I didn't speak. I just folded a paper napkin and placed it beneath the mug so the ring wouldn't stain the table. A man stood near the host stand. Not a customer. Navy suit, clean collar still. He scanned the room once calmly, then landed on me. Elise Whittaker. My name spoken like it meant something other than shift coverage. Croft pivoted so fast the napkin tray rattled. If this is about that refund mix-up, I can explain. She's been emotional lately. The man didn't blink. Ms. Whittaker, I believe we need to talk. Privately. I untied my apron. The knot resisted, then came loose all at once. I placed it on the counter without folding it. Croft was still speaking when I walked past something about company policy, something about customer satisfaction. None of it sounded like language meant for me. I followed the man outside. The bell above the diner door clattered against the frame behind us. Inside, conversations stilled, suspended somewhere between curiosity and calculation. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. There's a silence people make when they realize the version of you they built might not be the one standing in front of them. And I had no interest in correcting them. Some people are kept close not because they're wanted, but because they never make it hard to be ignored. I said yes to every shift, even when my name wasn't on the schedule. If someone called in sick, I was already halfway there. If a customer made a complaint, even one that wasn't mine, I apologized anyway. It was easier than explaining. When Penny needed weekends off for her custody agreement, I worked them. No one asked. I just offered before they had to look uncomfortable. There was a clipboard in the break room once, with a new drink special scrawled in red pen. I'd written it. Croft presented it to corporate as his idea the next day. I didn't correct him. At 17, I got a scholarship letter with a gold emblem and a packet of forms. I folded it 3 times and hid it behind the cereal box. Dad would have taken another job. I knew the way his back already curled from too many years hunched over spreadsheets. I didn't want to see it break. Not everyone's meant for more, my mother had once said when I mentioned law school at the dinner table. You're stable here. That should be enough. She hadn't stayed long after that. I kept wrapping birthday gifts for her every year, just in case. Small things. A scented candle, a mug that said, Mom, Fuel. I never mailed them. They sat in a drawer next to old receipts and single earrings. During a team meeting, once Croft read aloud names of high-performing staff for the month. Mine wasn't among them. Rue leaned over after and whispered, He always skips people who don't flirt. I nodded like it didn't matter. Dad never told me to sacrifice anything, but he also never stopped me. He'd say things like, You always come through, or you're the reliable one. Words that landed like praise but settled like weight. Sometimes I think I mistook usefulness for belonging. Nolan was speaking in the front seat, his voice low, clipped, full of purpose. I watched the sleeve of my coat bunch at the wrist, the seam coming loose where I'd stitched it by hand. I remembered doing that before my first diner shift, thinking I should look neat. I'd always believed that being agreeable, being quiet, would earn me space, that I'd be kept if I kept myself small. But some people only keep what doesn't ask to be held. I don't remember ever being told no. I was just left out of the yes. Nolan kept speaking from the front seat, words shaped around numbers and patterns, timelines that moved like clock hands I hadn't been watching. He described my father with terms like critical asset and irreplaceable methodology. I watched the hem of my sleeve fray at the wrist, a thread I hadn't trimmed fully curling back on itself. I remembered a birthday card from a few years ago. The handwriting was my mother's sharp, slanted, impatient. To the kids. Be well. There was only one of me left in that apartment. She knew that. I tucked the card between two grocery flyers and never opened it again. There was a time I won a regional essay contest. Croft heard about it during a shift change. He didn't congratulate me, just slid the schedule across the counter and said, "Make sure this little writing thing doesn't start affecting your hours." I showed Dad the certificate that night. He didn't say much, only tapped the edge and asked if I wanted it laminated. I said no. When he was admitted to the hospital, it wasn't family who offered rides or food. It was Mrs. Lorna Matthews from across the hall, the one who always slipped complaint notes under our door about the hallway light. She knocked once, left a paper bag of casseroles, and nodded like we both knew it wasn't about the food. The truth is, no one shut the door on me. They just never waited for me to walk through it. At a family gathering once, a cousin toasted the sisters and listed everyone by name, except mine. When I looked up, my aunt raised her glass with a smile that didn't quite land. Well, Elise has always been more behind the scenes. That's her way. I held my fork like it might help me stay seated. Dad used to say I had a mind for structure, that I saw order where others didn't. Maybe that's why I kept records of things that didn't seem worth keeping, grocery receipts misplaced, name tags, notes in margins of books no one else borrowed. The silence wasn't loud. It didn't hum or press. It just made space slowly until I couldn't tell where I ended, and it began. I don't think they forgot me. I think they never learned how to remember. I used to think injustice always came with volume. Raised voices, slammed doors, official stamps. I didn't expect it to arrive in a leather folder, and a voice too calm to interrupt. The report had my father's name on every page, printed in a font meant for legal eyes. Key findings, asset trails, irregularities in payroll disbursement. I traced one header with my finger, like it might vanish if I blinked too long. Director Hayes used words like systematic, manipulated, deliberate. I watched the condensation slide down the side of my untouched water glass. There was a name halfway down the document, Hartwell Food Services. I'd written that name 100 times on deposit envelopes, clock-in slips, W-2 forms. The folder closed with a soft snap. Your father encrypted everything. We can't access the files without the keys. He waited. I didn't speak. I was still hearing Croft's voice in the back of my head, the way he once leaned over the time card machine and muttered, "Clock out for breaks you didn't take. It balances out. At the time, I thought he meant for everyone. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. The apartment was still. Not silent, just still. There's a difference. Dad's desk hadn't changed. The corner of the drawer still stuck, unless you knew to lift before pulling. The edge of his monitor still had that faded sticker from a conference in St. Louis he never talked about. I opened the top drawer and found the old tea tin, the one with the bent lid, and the label half peeled. Inside 3 USB drives. No markings, no labels, no instructions. The calendar on the wall still read March. He hadn't flipped it since before the hospital. The notes were in pencil columns of numbers next to grocery lists and water meter readings. One column circled faintly in green. March 17th, April 2nd, April 14th. Some people don't need to say what they're doing, he once told me when I caught him shredding receipts after midnight. They just need to be ready when it counts. I looked at the USBs and thought about all the times I'd stayed late unpaid, believing that being useful meant being safe. Maybe I hadn't been invisible. Maybe I'd been part of the camouflage. And maybe that was what hurt most, realizing I'd been helping hold up something he was trying to tear down. Some exits don't need doors, just the decision to stop asking to be seen. I showed up to my shifts on time, wrote my initials on the sign-in sheet, wore the apron with the faded logo and the threadbare pocket. Croft didn't speak to me for 3 days, then stopped in front of the dish station with a smirk and said, "Didn't think you'd crawl back." I wrote his words on the second page of the new notebook, not as dialogue. Just the timestamp, the tone, the position of his left hand, gripping the coffee scoop like it belonged to him. The pages filled quickly. Guest counts register discrepancies when Rue logged out and came back in with different tip totals. I didn't explain what I was writing when Penny looked. She stopped asking after the first week. I kept the book in my coat, lining tucked behind the seam I had hand-stitched months ago when the zipper split. The same coat I wore the day I found the envelope inside Dad's safe, his writing neat and precise, 24 alphanumeric strings, numbered like chapters. 17 Hartwell Food Services. I didn't tell Nolan. I didn't call. I turned the envelope sideways, then upside down, as if the weight of it would change depending on the angle. Croft leaned on the counter one morning while I wiped down the syrup pump. "You think if you stay quiet long enough, you'll disappear?" I didn't answer. I adjusted the pump until it clicked into place. Later, I saw him speaking with a man I didn't recognize. Dark jacket, no delivery labels, no clipboard. They met behind the walk-in freezer. I timed it. 11 minutes. The cash drawer was short by $34 that day. I logged it. Dad once told me people who need to remind you they're in charge never actually are. That kind of power doesn't require reminders, it just moves. The coffee stain on the back of my notebook grew darker each shift pressed through from my hands. I stopped trying to clean it. Let it set. When Croft saw me outside the supply closet and narrowed his eyes, I offered the only thing I had left that resembled a smile. "Still here." He shook his head. "You'll wear yourself out trying to prove you matter." I didn't correct him. "I just wrote that down too. Some changes don't come with noise. They arrive like air settling after a long breath, held too long. The room I moved into had no curtains. The windows didn't need them. Nothing outside looked in, and nothing inside begged to be seen. I folded the twin blanket once then again until the corners aligned. A habit from another life. The floor creaked beneath the desk chair I never used. I sat on the ground, legs pulled close styrofoam cup in hand. The noodles had cooled, but I kept eating them. It wasn't about taste. It was about having something warm to finish. The laptop buzzed once, then dimmed. Transfer completed. 47,000 tant. The period felt unnecessary, like a formality trying to make the number seem smaller. I didn't blink. Dad's handwriting lived on the wall above the outlet. The note had started to curl at the edges. "You're the only one who will know what this means." I hadn't known not exactly, but I'd known enough. I clicked through state labor codes with one hand, tracing phrases like withheld earnings and misclassification of employment. Some were underlined, some I rewrote in the margins of an old receipt. I didn't print anything. A call came through that week. Unknown number, long ring, then voicemail. "You don't have to disappear, just because you're difficult," the voice said. It was my mother. I closed the phone, no reaction needed. She hadn't called when the hospital had, but now she had words. The timing was noted. The apartment next door played country radio late into the evening. I didn't knock. I let the voices pass through the drywall like fog, never fully forming. The kettle I brought from the old apartment still had a dent near the spout. The whistle didn't work. When I poured hot water over the last of the tea bags, the paper tag slid into the cup and darkened until the string dissolved. I left it there. Someone once told me that silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the absence of permission. No one asked where I'd gone. No one reminded me of my hours. No one checked my pocket for time slips or reminded me to smile before the table looked up. There was no applause for leaving quietly. But that, I think, was the first time I heard myself think without interruption. Some voices only know how to find you once you've stopped needing to be found. The first message came in clipped and cautious. A number I recognized but hadn't saved. "Croft's been under pressure," Penny said. "He thinks maybe things got misread. Maybe you'd want to smooth things out before it gets worse for everyone." She didn't ask how I was. The second message followed a day later, Rue this time. "We're just trying to stay afloat. I mean, you've got options now. Some of us don't." I didn't reply. I folded the paper where I'd written their names and placed it under the edge of my laptop, the corner already warped from heat. A manila envelope arrived without a return address. Inside, a typed letter on thick paper. The situation may benefit from discretion. A conversation could be mutually useful. It ended with a signature, Mark Grayson. The name held the chill of someone who had never learned to ask for anything, only to instruct. There was a time I might have felt grateful to be noticed by people like that. Penny once told me I wasn't built for politics. "You're sweet. That doesn't get you far." She said it after I hesitated to take a shift from a coworker who'd lied about a sick child. I covered it anyway. The envelope sat next to Dad's final letter. Same size, different weight. His was handwritten deliberate. The ink had pressed deep into the paper like he meant for it to last through mishandling. This new one had no fingerprints, no smudges. It had never been held with care. I read it once, then again, slower. Not for meaning there was none, but to measure the distance between how I used to read things and how I do now. They weren't asking me to return. They were asking for relief, for leniency, for me to unknow what I know. Croft had once told me in front of a full dining room, some people just aren't built for consequences. He was right. I wasn't built for them. I was built from them. I placed the envelope beneath the chipped ceramic dish, where I now keep loose change and apartment keys. I didn't tear it. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some returns are shaped like apologies. Others are shaped like warnings. This one came folded neat, sealed without warmth, and written in someone else's voice. That's how I knew it wasn't for me. I don't think becoming different happens all at once. It happens in the small refusals you stop explaining. The file cabinet in my apartment had 4 drawers. The top one held active cases. The The second, witness statements. The third, unused legal templates. The bottom drawer was empty. I kept it that way. Each morning I opened the safe, not for secrets anymore, but to review documentation that others now depended on. When people called, they didn't ask what shift I could cover. They asked how to speak up without being punished for it. I didn't always have the answer. But I had enough language to give them options. At our weekly meeting, I looked across the folding table at Penny. She was reading a policy draft with a highlighter between her fingers. Rue took notes without glancing up. Dennis leaned against the wall with a notebook tucked into his jacket. The heater in the office buzzed too loudly. No one moved to fix it. "We can't wait for enforcement to catch up," I said. "We're not the system. We're the flare before the fire." They nodded, not because they agreed, but because they knew. My teacup chipped further last week. I kept using it. The crack hadn't reached the rim. The heat stayed in. A reporter emailed to ask for an interview. I forwarded it to spam. The subject line used words like hero and trailblazer. I don't know who wrote those definitions, but they weren't written by people who stood behind dish pits at 2 a.m. or scrubbed fryer oil off their jeans before court appearances. One of the board members at a partner nonprofit pulled me aside after a panel. "You could have a bigger platform if you'd just be a little more visible." I smiled. Visibility doesn't always protect people. Sometimes it paints targets. He didn't follow up. I get invitations now, panels, grants, banquets with set menus and assigned seating. I read them the same way I read warning labels, useful in theory, but not always built for the actual risks. Someone once told me I was being too careful. You can't change the world with a whisper, but some things aren't meant to be shouted. They're meant to be steady, repeated, grounded, done quietly enough that people trust them to stay. I don't need to be known. I just need the work to keep moving when I'm not in the room. Closure doesn't always arrive with answers. Sometimes it just stops asking. I returned to the apartment not for sentiment but for silence. The kind of stillness only old air and settled dust can hold. The carpet hadn't changed. Neither had the drawer under the desk. The will was folded once not sealed. The ink bled slightly at the signature line where his pen must have paused. It ended with a sentence written smaller than the rest. "If you're reading this, I probably didn't get the chance to say you were enough from the beginning." There was no ceremony, no legal stamp. Just his handwriting, unsure, but honest. I didn't cry. I held the page for a long time before placing it between the pages of a book he used to read twice a year, cover bent backward from habit. I burned the last duplicate of the Hartwell report that night. The flame moved quickly, licking through the numbered exhibits, like they'd never been built to last. I stood with the window open and let the smoke pull out into the quiet. The room smelled like paper and metal, sharp, not unpleasant. I wrote a letter to an address that hadn't changed in 10 years. "Thought you should know it's done. You don't have to wonder." I didn't add a name. I didn't write mine either. I folded it into thirds and placed it on the counter next to a roll of stamps I never reached for. There's a map in the office now. Colored pins mark where we've filed, where we've won, where we've been asked to come back. A thin, red line connects the earliest cases. I used to trace it with my thumb, like I needed to prove the movement to myself. Last week, I scratched out the name printed at the bottom, Whitaker Legal Advocacy. It had been Dad's name and mine by default. It had served its purpose. In the space beneath, I wrote 2 words in pencil, the quiet work. No need for more. A board member noticed and raised an eyebrow. Changing the name means changing the legacy. I closed the folder in front of me. Maybe the legacy doesn't need to be remembered, just continued. He didn't argue. Some people want closure that echoes. Mine came folded, unsigned, and without ceremony. That was enough. Some mornings arrive without knocking. They just settle in and wait to be noticed. I filled the kettle halfway, not because I needed the full cup, but because the weight felt right in my hand. The whistle hadn't worked in years and I didn't bother replacing it. Some sounds don't need returning. The tea steeped longer than necessary. I didn't time it. The water cooled, the tag slid into the bottom of the mug, the one with the faint crack along the rim. I held it gently. No reason not to. The map above the desk had changed over time. The colours never mattered, only the marks. I used pencil now, thin crosses for each case we'd followed through. Some lines curved slightly off course where the borders blurred. I didn't fix them. A folder sat unopened beside the window. The label read, Ridgeway Properties, Alleged Violations. Thick paper clipped tight. I'd seen that kind of weight before. I didn't move it. The air outside was still. The curtains barely moved. There was no knock on the door, no missed call, no message waiting to be answered, just quiet. I opened the desk drawer with the soft slide of wood worn smooth. The envelope from Croft remained untouched, creased, but unbroken. I hadn't reread it. I didn't throw it out. Some endings don't require erasing. Only containment. I closed the drawer without a sound. The chair by the window wasn't comfortable, but I didn't need it to be. I sat with the blank notebook in my lap. First page, crisp spine, unbent. I didn't reach for a pen. I just let the weight of the paper rest against my palm. Once my mother told me, people like you don't last. You're not built for cold. I didn't answer her then. I don't need to now. There is no plaque with my name. No framed photograph. No speech waiting to be delivered. Just a room, a cup, a chair, and a task that never needed applause. Some stories don't resolve. They settle. I didn't light a candle. I didn't check the clock. I didn't update the list on the bulletin board. I let the silence hold everything it needed. No one's watching me. No one has to. I don't need to win. I just need to keep going.